Hi, I'm Kristin Marshall. I'm from the Northwest Fisheries Science Center in Seattle. And I'm going to be talking about a project I was involved with as a postdoc that was looking at the potential effects of ocean acidification on the California current food web and its fisheries. There were a lot of co-authors on this work, and I will just mention that Isaac Kaplan and Tim Essington were the two lead PIs on the grant funded by the OA program. And so this research falls under the activity area of research to understand vulnerability. And specifically, it's focusing on the question, what do regional ecosystem models coupled with biogeochemical models predict ecosystem, food web, and economic impacts of OA will be? And what are the anticipated impacts and changes to ecosystem services, in particular fisheries, for this research as a result of OA? And so the work that we did here was focused on projecting ocean acidification impacts on the California current using an Atlantis ecosystem model, shown there on the right. And we did this by developing an oceanographic model of 2060's pH to force the bottom end of that oceanography submodel, as well as a literature review of pH sensitivities of over 300 different studies from the literature that was synthesized by Shao and Bush. And so these two pieces fed into our Atlantis ecosystem model to tell us about what the direct and indirect effects of changes in pH on the ecosystem and its fisheries might be. And so the model domain that we were looking at spanned the entire California current. Atlantis is a three-dimensional spatially explicit ecosystem model. And so we go all the way from Canada down to Mexico. That's the center panel in this figure here. And then around the outside, you can see some expanded views of some portions along the coast, so you can see the resolution of the model boxes. And then within those model boxes, we capture the dynamics of a variety of different critters, going from phytoplankton and zooplankton all the way up to things like whales. And so what this allows us to do is take the pH impacts synthesized in the literature, those direct effects that we think are likely to happen in some of these lower trophic level groups, and then propagate those through the food web through predator-prey interactions. And so just a result slide on our oceanography, so you can get a sense of what the changes in pH are looking like that underlie all of this work. So here is our ROMS model that was forced by GFDL Earth System model in the RCP 8.5 scenario. And on the left there, you see what 2013 pH looks like at the surface. And then on the right is 2063 pH. And so as you can see, those warmer colors, the reds are higher pH, the cooler colors are the greens. There's about a 0.2 unit change in pH over this 50-year projection on average at the surface. And so using that change, we are able to propagate that through the food web and ask what are the effects on the critters that we care about and that are subject to fisheries on the West Coast. And so here is just a results slide showing, or an infographic that sort of boils down the main results of our paper that was published in Global Change Biology in 2017. And so on this slide, what you can see is some of the groups that were influenced by these pH changes. And lower down towards the bottom, you see the groups that were more negatively impacted in terms of their changes in biomass and catch in the model. And up at the top, you can see a few groups that were positively impacted. And then the critters are grouped by which fisheries they're caught by, which sort of sector of fisheries. And so on the left, you see state fisheries and groundfish fisheries next to them, where the two sectors where we saw the strongest impacts. And then the one other piece of information on this slide is that the dollar values are the 2013 revenue from these fisheries. So you get a sense of the scale of the impacts in terms of revenue. And in particular, I want to highlight in the state-managed fisheries that Dungeness crab fishery is really valuable. And so the negative impacts that we predicted using our model are most strongly seen in those state-managed fisheries driven by Dungeness crab, with some as well in that groundfish fishery. So this is the sort of a snapshot of the coast-wide impacts. We also looked at regional level impacts because this is a spatially explicit model, as I described. And so in this paper that was led by a graduate student, Emma Hodgson, she took the coast-wide results and broke them down into regions and translated, by linking to an economics model, translated the changes in catch and biomass to port-level economic changes. And so the addition to this figure here are the fleets that you see in gray that are along the coast. And the darker the shading of those fleets is the stronger economic change that, that they saw as a result of the pH changes in the model. And then again, you can see the critters that are influenced with the more red colors being stronger negative impacts. So the take home from this work is that even though we saw the strongest pH level changes in the southern part of the model and the strongest biomass influences down there, or biomass impacts, ultimately the strongest economic impacts were in the north because of the reliance on the groundfish and Dungeness crab fisheries up there. And so the key takeaways from this work were that we were able to use a model to integrate all the way from physics to fisheries, and that allowed us to look at not just the direct effects of acidification on invertebrates, but also indirect effects through predation in the food web on fish and inverts, including those Dungeness crab. And these led to strong effects on nearshore state-managed invert fisheries, as well as the groundfish fishery, and ultimately economic effects that were strongest in the north. So OAP funding here was really critical to be able to develop this tool that allowed us to synthesize data from individual studies and projected ecosystem level effects to changing pH. And these results have been included in briefings to the Fishery Management Council in the context of their Climate and Communities Initiative. And so looking forward, the next steps with this work that we're currently underway is to build it out to look at multiple stressors, so temperature and hypoxia along with OA. And in particular, we're thinking about, or we're planning to include, in collaboration with others, new ROMS oceanographic projections, as well as shifts in species distribution and fishing areas, and starting to think about what are the impacts of global change in harvest rules for stocks that are crossing international boundaries. And so I would just make a plug that I think ongoing support for this kind of work and ongoing model development in the biophysical and economic realm is really needed to be able to continue to integrate new empirical results and field data as they're coming out, as well as making the modeling products more ready for management. And with that, I will thank you for your time.